Welcome to Ranking the Discogs, a new series I want to try out where I listen to an artist or band's discography and rank the albums according to my opinion. I wanted to sort of make this a series because I plan on doing more discographies in the future and some of them might just be interesting enough to cover in this series. So, for the first official episode of this series, I will be discussing Weezer. Yep, Weezer. Weezer is an alternative rock band that has been celebrated for creating some of the most iconic alt-rock music of the 90s, especially with their first two albums Blue and Pinkerton. People revered their nerdy take on the genre, and Rivers Cuomo's unique style of writing truly brought life to their songs. With massive songs such as Buddy Holly, Say It Ain't So, and Undone the Sweater Song, they'd created a pretty great name for themselves, and there was really no way they could mess it up. And the other 11 albums happened. Not only is Weezer known for making some of the best alt-rock, but also some of the worst. Many people have labeled them as one of the most inconsistent bands of all time, not sound-wise, but mainly quality-wise. Think of it like this: for every Across the Universe or Hey Jude, you get at least 3 or 4 Wild Honey Pies. Only difference is, the album it's from is one of their absolute best. So in this video, I'm going to be ranking all 13 of their studio albums from worst to best after listening to them recently, and basically just dissecting why they're so good or bad and how they ended up in that position. I won't be covering Death to Force Metal or Christmas with Weezer, just cause, yeah. Anyway, let's go. Number 13. Raditude is not here. I won't get into it just yet, but honestly, if you're gonna drag out your album with generic top 40 pandering that just letting loose and embracing lameness, then you'll see me bumping the ladder much more. I'm just saying. Oh, how I wish this album was make-believe. Okay, so this is where you're gonna add the laugh track. This album isn't a train wreck or anything, it's not an absolute disaster, but boy is it a slog of an album. Did the album filled with some of their most by-the-numbers and formulaic songs have to be their longest? This album is just painfully generic. It is filled to the brim with uninteresting melodies and production, really mediocre lyrics, millennial whoops, and 4 chords galore. I just didn't really feel anything from this album. Nothing really made me excited or like I was having the time of my life, just nothing. Think of it like this: imagine you have a really juicy burger. This is the Blue album. Whoa, my burger suddenly turned to an ordinary slice of bread, which is representative of the 5th studio album from the band Weezer, Make Believe. Yeah, I tend to use burgers as metaphors quite a lot. I'm honestly not too sure why. There are times where I can say this album is so bad it's actually funny. Beverly Hills, for instance, is a disaster of a song, especially that hook and the... whatever that part's supposed to be. It's my favorite track on the album, simply because of how dumb it is. This Is Such a Pity is also a train wreck with its usage of synths, but it stands out as memorable in all the wrong ways. But then you have tracks like We Are All on Drugs. I just can't bring myself to defend that one. That one just plain sucks. So overall, I don't think this album was unbearably awful or anything, but it's the Weezer album I have the least to like about. That's what puts it in last for me. Number 12. I mean, where else was Raditude gonna be if it wasn't in last? It's no mystery that Raditude is one of the most infamous albums in rock history. I mean, shouldn't be obvious just from looking at it. I mean, Raditude, that album cover, which in Weezer's defense does actually feature a pretty impressive jump from that dog. 9 out of 10, just on that merit. Not to mention the song titles. Okay, let's see here. I'm Your Daddy, The Girl Got Hot, Can't Stop Partying, In the Mall. Oh yeah, no, this is completely fine. This isn't bound for disaster in any way whatsoever. Surprise, surprise, it sucks. It's easily Weezer at their lamest. They're at a point where they really didn't care about their reputation as a band and decided to throw in the towel and just say, screw it, we're gonna have as much fun as we possibly can. Don't get me wrong, I still think this album is pretty awful through and through. I'd say it's much worse than Make Believe, but it's honestly quite enjoyable in an ironic way, which I decide bumps it up for me. Where this is most present, and stay with me here, are the first 4 tracks into In the Mall. Unlike Make Believe, which maybe had a couple of highlights, then was a slog for the rest of the album, I found myself having more fun with this. Even Can't Stop Partying, which is so blatantly awful I have to assume it's a joke song, I just can't stop listening to. Lil Wayne and Weezer is such a bizarre combination, and you just don't get risks like that on Make Believe. You don't get a goddamn Hindi-inspired song on Make Believe. Wait, a what? Yeah, that one's bad. This review here puts it better than I could. The most entertaining Weezer album, the only one you need. I might think Make Believe is less of a sonic disaster, but nothing on that will have me laughing as much as Can't Stop Partying. I'm just saying. Despite 5 songs in this set I'd say are so bad they're actually fun, the rest is honestly just pretty mediocre or straight up bad. The album as a whole just feels incredibly cheesy and features some laughably dated production and some of River's worst songwriting yet. I might be having my fun with this, but you won't really see me praising it or anything. Number 11. This album is essentially Weezer making a second Make Believe, if you will, but this time it's much less boring and has a few decent highlights. Except this time, it's filled with new cliches and is way too overproduced. While I don't think Pacific Daydream is as bad as Raditude or Make Believe, and it does have a few genuine highlights, it's still not that great. Whoever was producing this album decided to make a whole lot of these tracks seriously overblown, and that's what ruins this album for me. The electronic sound just sort of feels like an overload of information, and it's both cringe and headache-inducing. This is especially true of the Blurry Face B-side Feels Like Summer, Happy Hour, and Any Friend of Diane's. There's just too much going on. The song structures are once again just attempts to follow the new popular trends. Millennial whoops, the chorus structures where the first line repeats the end of the chorus, which shouldn't annoy me as much as it does, and the Maroon 5 direction of the other band members barely do anything. It's probably their most sugar-sweet album to date too, which sometimes works to the album's benefit with some reasonably fun tracks like Weekend Woman and Beach Boys, but kind of ruins tracks like La Mancha Screwjob, which features a chorus I really can't stand. Like I said before, this album isn't completely irredeemable, as there's some pretty decent tracks that bump this album up a bit, such as Mexican Fender, Beach Boys, Weekend Woman, and the more stripped-back QB Blitz, but the rest of the album is either just pretty middle of the road or some of their worst material yet. I honestly think if it wasn't for the overproduced nature of this album, then I think it would have been much more enjoyable. It's also a shame that this album isn't laughably bad like Raditude was, so there's not really a lot here to ironically enjoy, unlike that album. I mean, it's definitely less of a train wreck, but still a step down for Weezer. Number 10. 2 years after Pacific Daydream, Weezer make what was supposed to happen that year, and the outcome is a much less overblown version of that album that still falls short of a lot of Weezer's best work. Can I get this out of the way quickly? The singles, or the first 4 tracks, are an incredible stretch. I seriously think these 4 tracks are great, and are some of their best post-Pinkerton tracks. Maybe it's just because I've come back to them a lot, but I still stand by what I said. For instance, Can't Knock the Hustle is a pretty funky track with really solid production, and a braggadocious feel that's kind of made even better by the fact that it's just trying too hard. I do genuinely like this one though, I'm just saying. The pop reggae tinge in Zombie Bastards originally turned me off a year ago, but is now one of my favourite Weezer songs. It's a real bop, and I've heard it 34 times, I'm not even ashamed. Another one of my favourite Weezer songs comes in the form of High as a Kite, and due to not being overproduced, Living in LA is one of the best tracks on Pacific Daydream. I wish I could praise the other 6 tracks this much. There's a lot of problems I feel like Weezer albums face late into their career. That being, they're really front-loaded. This album couldn't be a more accurate example, as after Piece of Cake, the album just falls apart and becomes pretty middle of the road. Piece of Cake and Byzantine are fine, I guess, but the 3 tracks between them aren't that great. Like, Too Many Thoughts in My Head would have been solid if it weren't for the lyrics, the second half of the chorus, and the rapped verse at the end. But then we get to California Snow. It is terrible. Someone allowed this disaster of a song to be on the end of an album. Think about that. It is up there with some of their worst, possibly like top 5. You know, despite the great opening stretch, I'm not too sure who this album was supposed to appeal to. Like, is there an audience for this type of stuff? Who is this made for? What is the point? Number 9. Wait, Weezer released another album last year? Weezer decided to embrace the lameness and make an album covering classic pop songs, all of which don't in any way match the excellence of the original songs and just makes the album feel like a karaoke album. And honestly, it's not even that bad. This album isn't any more than a joke album, and for that I somewhat admire it. They only made their Africa cover because a Twitter account kept asking them to do one as a joke, so with the viral success of their cover, they might as well capitalize on it. This album basically shows them wearing their lameness like a tuxedo. They're proud of who they are and they're embracing the memes. It's hard to hate this album on that merit. The covers themselves, they're decent. They don't really do anything original with the songs, they just do karaoke for 36 minutes. You'll never catch me, or anyone for that matter, listening to Weezer's Billie Jean over Michael Jackson's. No song on here is bad per se, but none of them particularly great. Also, they let Brian Bell sing one of the songs for some bizarre reason. That's a little bit strange. I hope they don't have any other instances of the band members singing. Otherwise, we're really in for a ride. NumberEight. I spoke too soon. Well, if there's one thing we can all agree on, it's better than Make Believe. Yeah, this album's a really mixed bag. Weezer decided to move straight away from the top 40 pandering and Make Believe and create, and make of this what you will, their most experimental album yet. This album is all over the place stylistically. In fact, I'd say they have their own Bohemian Rhapsody with the track The Greatest Man Who Ever Lived, a track that combines the styles of rap, Green Day, Nirvana, Beethoven, spoken word, the Andrews Sisters, and somehow they actually pull it off pretty well. This album also does contain some more radio-friendly songs in the beginning of the album, those being Troublemaker and Pork and Beans, and the latter is one of their best songs in quite a while. The rest of the album in terms of quality is completely up in the air. Heart Songs is okay musically, but features some pretty cliched lyrics and some really out-of-place trap hi-hats. It becomes obvious that they're not really taking this album too seriously once Everybody Get Dangerous pops up, which is semi-enjoyable in an ironic way, and there's a record scratch in a Weezer song. I don't have too much to say about Dreamin' though, it's fine. Then Weezer lets the other band members have a turn. Remember the foreshadowing from before? Thought I Knew, sung by Brian Bell, is really generic and features some pretty out-of-place electronic drums. Cold Dark World, sung by Scott Schreiner, features some pretty weak songwriting, and Automatic by Patrick Wilson is actually quite a solid song, I won't lie. And finally, The Angel and the One is a pretty great closer that is out of place, but then again, what is in place for this album? Is that even a thing? So overall, the Red Album is a pretty decent album, featuring some pretty high highs, but also some pretty low lows. It's their most hit or miss album, that's for sure. NumberSeven. Wow, this album's just really average. It's incredibly inoffensive, it doesn't affect me in any way. I'm not mad at all about this album existing. Following the originally poor reception of Pinkerton, the Green Album waters down Weezer's trademark sound, converts it into a very basic alt rock sound. The instrumentation is pretty dead average, the songwriting is pretty basic and traditional, and nothing really holds up to their past work. It misses the spark and personality that their original work had, and ends up just playing it safe. I'll give it this though, it's not bad by any means. Like I said before, there's not much either really astonished me, and there's only a few select tracks I see myself coming back to, like Don't Let Go or Hash Pipe. I think if I used that burger metaphor from Make Believe here instead of there, it would make more sense, but the bread wouldn't taste bad or anything, it would just be a plain slice of bread. It'll do for now. I would have originally put this below the Red Album on the ranking, because I believe the Red Album had the more significant high points and took way more risks. However, I feel like unlike the Red Album, the Green Album knows what it is, and it feels very stylistically consistent throughout the 28 minutes of runtime. Yep, only 28 minutes long, the band's shortest album yet. What I will give it though is that it never feels longer than that. It's just a nice little breeze of Don't let go. NumberSix. Somehow an album promoted by Fred Figglehorn is in the upper half of the ranking list. Who would have thought? And no, I wasn't kidding. Oh my god, it's Weezer now! Hurley's a pretty straightforward album for the band, coming just less than a year after Raditude. It follows pretty typical Weezer formulas such as being front-loaded. I honestly don't have a whole lot to say about this one, because even if it is a spot above the Green Album, this album sort of has the same score as that one for me. But what I will say is that for the great highs this has, and unlike Red, I think the highs here push this one even higher on the list. It is some serious lows, even lower lows than Red, some of their worst material yet. The first 4 songs I think are really great. I think these 4 tracks are genuinely some of Weezer's best, possibly living up to the best songs on. Then you get to Where's My Sex, and this song is about exactly what the title says. I'm not even joking, that's exactly what it's about. I have just gotten word that the lyrics are supposed to be about socks, but instead, they replaced the word socks with sex. The more you know, I suppose. Also, I think that song might just win the award for Worst Rivers Vocal Performance. Then you get to the track Smart Girls, and once that chorus hits, second worst Rivers Vocal Performance. The track Time Flies has grown on me a bit, but what the hell is that mix? Was it recorded on a rusty cheese grater or something? No, seriously, listen for yourself. I'm being serious here. But anyway, I still enjoy Hurley quite a bit more than Green or Red, but it is definitely not without its flaws. Think about all the poor Fred fans that listened to this album and heard Where's My Sex for the first time. Must have been a real experience. I can imagine. Number 5. Talk about jump in quality, this went straight from a 6 to an 8 out of 10. I never really see Maladroit getting a lot of discussion when Weezer's brought up, which is a shame, because this is actually a really solid album. Like, there's a full-on 7-track run the start of the album, which is full of nothing but great songs. I just feel like the more grungy mix compared to the more watered-down Green album really just made this stick out to me on my first listen. This album is the Green album if it went hard as hell. They incorporate a noisy and more of a grunge-esque sound to this album, and it just really makes it pop. The instrumentation is just a massive step up stylistically and just sounds so much more vibrant and fun. The melodies are more interesting, even if Take Control borders on being a new metal song, and River's vocals feel more passionate. Everything just feels less generic and more full of life. This album even houses some of Weezer's best songs in my opinion. Keep Fishin', Death and Destruction, and Burnt Jam. I especially love the dynamic and carefree nature of Burnt Jam, making it one of Weezer's most unique and possibly overlooked songs. However, I do think this album trails off a bit in the second half, and most of the material on that side doesn't really live up to the excellent first half. This also includes the pretty underwhelming closer, December. This album might not be anything massive in the lyrical department, and still plays it safe like the Green album, but I feel like Maladroit separates itself from Green with the more heavy instrumentation and the more catchy and unique song structures. It's without a doubt one of Weezer's most underrated releases. And with the Hurley songs living up to a certain album, it's this one. We're not all the way there just yet. We're getting there though. Number 4. You know, I'm not saying I was worried before listening to this, but I feel like Weezer was right. Maybe everything will be alright in the end. I am happy to announce that we have reached a very special point in the Weezer discography. We're 9 albums in, and we finally reached the albums that aren't front-loaded! I shouldn't need to celebrate this! After the release of Hurley, Weezer went on hiatus for 4 years, and that 4-year break is what led us to Everything Will Be Alright in the end, and without a doubt, it paid off. This album is the most consistent and focused in years, and here it really feels like they're giving it their all. With the added addition of glam rock, it gives this album much more large and rock-centric feel that separates it from their other material, and I honestly don't think I can name any bad tracks on here. Maybe there's a couple I don't care for, but they're only minor blips in a consistently solid album. I feel like this album was sort of an apology for the band's shortcomings, cough cough, best represented by tracks Back to the Shack and Eulogy for a Rock Band. The former track is River singing about how he's lost most of his core audience from their past few albums, and how he wishes to return to the glory days, and basically how he wants to play what he wants to play, regardless if it fails or not. Can I also mention that it's one of their best songs? Take me back to the shack, back to the strap with the lightning strap. That hook will probably never leave my head. Not only that, but the song right after it too. Eulogy for a Rock Band then sings about a rock band slowly declining in relevancy, and while it's unknown what band they're talking about since it's never explicitly stated, I think it ties into the previous track really well. For all we know, it could be tied to Weezer themselves. Here, I feel like Weezer knows exactly what they're doing, and at a time where people were beginning to write them off as a joke band, they stepped in to remind people that they can still make some pretty great music late into their career. There aren't any unnecessary detours that plagued their last few albums, and even the Future Scope trilogy is a great way to cap off the album. Let's hope they can keep this up for their next album. At least we raise some hell. Number 3. And they did. It's gonna be alright if you're on a sinking ship. Weezer returned to form with the White Album, a more pop-centric album that without a doubt is their most summer-focused album yet. One look at the album cover, the song titles, the very first few seconds of the album, you'll see yourself with a surfboard in your hand and swimming clothes on the second you start the album. What the hell? It's clear their focus here was to make a fun and easygoing summer album, and they succeeded. The instrumentation is catchy and vibrant, the songwriting is a major improvement from the past decade, and the hooks, man. The hooks on here are seriously top notch, possibly some of their best to date. I mean, for instance, the hook on the song, oh wait, that's the whole track list. Yeah, I think all 10 songs are great hooks, but in general, I don't even dislike any songs on this album. It's even more consistently great than their last album, and the more fun and summer themed approach just makes it even more enjoyable for me. It's not like this album is anything completely unique or original, but it's just executed so well. If I had to pick my favorite hooks though, I guess, Thank God for Girls, Girl We Got a Good Thing, LA Girls, and Jacked Up. God, that's a lot of girls. Thank God for Girls indeed. Whoop, I've yet another album to add to my long list of reasons of why 2016 was one of the best years for music. Number 2. And then summer ended. Nobody talk to me. The second album from Weezer was a major left turn from the more polished and simplistic sound of their debut album, instead opting for a more rougher and much less refined sound. The lyrical content is substituted for more distraught and heartbroken vignettes, bordering on being creepy at times. This album did end up becoming a cult classic, but the album was failing commercially and critically at the time of release, and it's easy to see why. The easily accessible Blue album appealed to the mainstream while having a uniquely nerdy spark to it, and the sudden transition into Pinkerton's display of emotion and roughness took a big toll on Weezer's commercial status. Anyway, this album is incredible. All the rawness and honesty of Pinkerton is just what makes it work for me. Rivers is basically saying to the world, "Hey everyone, I am a massive loser." And he doesn't spare any details. From his description of his On the Good Life to the downright creepy and obsessive soliloquy of Across the Sea, it kept me captivated. I've never heard an album so honest and fragile. The rough instrumentation backs up the theme of this album even more, and it results in some of Weezer's best material. Plus, even with how distraught this album feels, it also houses some of the most fun tracks to date. Tracks like Get You, Why Bother, and The Good Life are some of the most upbeat and fun tracks on the album, and are some I see myself returning to endlessly. But here's the thing. Despite how different Pinkerton and Blue are, I'd say they're like really close in terms of quality. I mean incredibly close. In fact, just as I was writing this section, I was debating whether I preferred this over Blue, or vice versa. Honestly, I'd probably give them the exact same score, but if I had to choose a personal favorite... Number 1. What's with these homies dissing my album? Yeah, the Blue album's the best one. It'd be this one. Now, like I was saying when I was talking about Pinkerton, it's a very close call between this and that album. So many things were convincing me of each side, like the emotional impact of Pinkerton and the increase of growing songs on Blue, but I feel like at the end of the day, it's all just down to personal preference. Anyway, Blue is objectively the best one. You're either on the side that the more polished and overall iconic sound of this album is what makes it better, or that the brutal honesty and rawness of Pinkerton gives it more impact than Blue, or you're more interesting. But while I love both albums equally, Blue just barely beats it out for me. For starters, the songs themselves are just great. Each song here just has this, carefree spirit that I can't get enough of, which includes the vibrant and fun instrumentation, great hooks, and the incredibly solid writing. Rivers' view of the world over time really hooked me in, and it's especially fun to read about how he originally perceived the songs compared to how most people see them. It just gives everything on the album so much more personality. On top of that, the songs themselves are just so much fun and are excellently performed. My Name is Jonas, for example, is a great opener that hooks you in with the first few seconds. Then you've got No One Else, which is a song that I wrote off at first, but came to actually really love over time for some reason. It's now one of my favorites off the album. That then leads into the lyrically changed The World Has Turned and Left Me Here, which flows so smoothly front to back. Buddy Holly is short and sweet, but it's just made even better by this one sound effect I'm not too sure how to describe. You know, I could go on and on about each great song on this album, but I don't want to waste too much time here. Just know that I really like each song on this album. They all have their own unique spark that made them stand out, and each track grew on me over time. Overall, Weezer's unique spark, mixed with the more mainstream sound of this album, I think makes it deserve its iconic status in alternative rock. And out of all the albums in their discography, I don't think any of them match the absolute spark that Blue had, even if I love Pinkerton just as much. That, in my opinion, is what makes this Weezer's best album. listening to every Weezer album has been a very weird experience, but a ride I enjoyed going on. It was bumpy, for sure. Weezer have their fair share of great albums, just okay albums, messy albums, and really bad albums. They're without a doubt one of the most inconsistent bands I've ever listened to in terms of quality. If I had to share the albums I'd recommend by them, especially if you're new to the band, it'd probably be these three, although I'd recommend you listen to Pinkerton a bit later if I had to give my say. And here's a list of some of my favourite songs by the band, in order of albums.
My name's Jonas. What's with these homies dissing my girl? If you want to destroy my sweater, get too hard. I gotta live on an island to find the truth. I'd be happy for one moment. Don't give a hoot about what you think. Back to the shack, back to the strat with the lightning strike.
From what I've heard out of the upcoming Van Weezer singles, then yes, there's actually a thing that's happening. Actually, it sounds like it'll be pretty promising, so I'll be interested to see where that ends up on my ranking list, whenever it ends up releasing. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I'd love to continue doing these types of videos, so please, if you have any artist recommendations, leave them down in the comments below and I might add them to my artist discography wheel. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and keep it Weezy.